AITA for telling my husband his mom can't live with us for months-long stretches. My mom comes to us and leaves on the same day, and his mom wants to come to us for 6 months. My husband and I have been married for just under 2 years, and our son is now 10 months old. We live in Canada, where I was born and raised, while my husband immigrated here years ago when he was still a student. We built a life together, slowly but surely, and things have generally been good between us. One of the biggest blessings in my life has been having my parents close by, especially during my pregnancy and after our son was born. My mom, in particular, has been incredible. She comes over regularly to help with the baby and household things, and she has really been a source of support for both me and my husband. I always felt lucky that my husband and my mother got along well. There was a nice rhythm to our lives, a sense of teamwork, of family. His parents, on the other hand, live in another country. We have only visited them twice, once for our wedding, which took place in their country, and then again 7 months ago for a short visit after our son was born. That trip had its own set of challenges, but we managed, and it was important for my husband that his parents got to meet their grandson. For months now, my husband had been bringing up the idea of his mother visiting us. I was genuinely excited about it. I love hosting. We had just moved into a beautiful new house, and I had put a lot of effort into decorating it and making it feel like home. We had a spacious guest room ready, and the thought of finally being able to host his mom, to make her feel welcomed and included, made me happy. I knew how much it would mean to my husband, and I wanted that for him. A few days ago, my husband was sitting at the kitchen table, visibly frustrated, grumbling about how complicated his mother's visa application was. I was surprised to hear that because I always thought visitor visas were relatively straightforward. I asked him why it was taking so much effort. That was when he casually mentioned that this was not just a regular visitor visa, this application was for a super visa that would allow her to stay for up to 2 years at a time. I froze. I asked him why she would need a visa for 2 years when the standard 6 months seemed more than enough for a visit. I was under the impression that she would be staying for maybe a month, tops. That was about as long as we had stayed with them during our trip. He shrugged and said that his mother was considering winding down her medical practice, basically retiring, and thought that this way she could come and stay longer if everything worked out. I could feel my stomach sink. I told him, trying to stay calm, that he should probably just apply for the regular visa, because there was no way his mom would be staying for anything close to 6 months. Hosting her for a few weeks, even a month, was one thing. Integrating another adult into our household for an indefinite period was something else entirely. He looked at me like I had slapped him. He said it was his mom, that she often told him how alone she felt now, that she could not go to his brother's place because his brother lived with roommates, and that we could not just put a timer on her visit. I tried to explain that it was not about putting a timer on anything. It was about setting reasonable expectations. I told him that his mom helping us with our son was not something we needed. We were managing fine, especially with my mom's help. My mom came over often, yes, but she always left at the end of the day. She was a visitor, not a live-in family member. That was a huge difference. He got defensive and said it was not fair that my parents could visit whenever they wanted but his mom could not even consider staying for longer. That hurt more than I think he realized, because my parents had been instrumental in helping us during the hardest days after the baby was born. I asked him if he wanted us to start limiting how often my mom visited, trying to understand if that was what he wanted. He immediately said no, that he appreciated everything she did, but it still did not seem fair to him regarding his own parents. I reiterated that it was not the same. When my mom visits, she comes, she helps, and she leaves. His mom would be living with us. Living. There would be no daily end to the visit, no personal space, no time for just us. I told him again, gently but firmly, that he needed to apply for the standard visitor visa. I could see the frustration and anger building in him, but I felt strongly that this was important. That night, he chose to sleep on the couch. In all our time together, we had never gone to bed angry like that. The coldness between us the next day was almost physically painful. He barely spoke to me. I tried to focus on our son, to act normal, but there was this heavy silence hanging over everything. I talked to my mom about it because I needed someone to help me think through the mess. She was very clear, having his mom live with us, even for long visits, would deeply affect our household dynamic. She said this was something absolutely worth standing my ground over, even if it caused friction now. She reminded me that it was easier to set boundaries early than to try to fix resentment later. Days passed, and I did not see him working on the application anymore. He was short with me, polite but distant, like a coworker you had accidentally offended. Then, last night, his mother called. I watched him take the call, his face tight and guarded. After he hung up, he left the house for a while. When he came back, I gathered the courage to ask him how the conversation with his mom had gone. He said he had told her that he was still looking into which application would be best for her situation. Then he looked at me, tired and worn, and asked if I had changed my mind. I shook my head and told him no, my feelings had not changed. Without a word, he just shook his head in disappointment and turned on the television, losing himself in some random show. And here we are now. Things are still tense, and it feels awful. I miss the way we used to laugh easily together, the way we would reach for each other's hands without thinking. Now there is this invisible wall between us, built from hurt and unmet expectations. I know it probably seems small from the outside. I know it would make him happy to have his mom here, but I also know that if I bend on this, if I agree to something that fundamentally changes my home life, it will not end well. I will end up resentful, and that resentment will poison everything. I want to find a compromise, but I do not see one right now that protects our home, our marriage, and our sanity. So, am I the asshole? Update 1. First of all, I just want to say thank you for all the feedback and support I got on my original post. I read every comment and message, and even though it was overwhelming at times, it honestly helped me stay grounded and clear about what I wanted, needed, and was willing to compromise on. Yesterday, when my husband came back from work, I decided to try and open the lines of communication again. Things had been tense and cold since the whole discussion about his mom's visa started, and it was eating me up inside. I knew we could not go on like that. When he walked through the door, his whole posture still screamed distance, but I pushed past my own discomfort and told him that I was his wife, the mother of his child, and this was not the way we were going to communicate with each other. I said it gently but firmly. I think something in him softened at that because, for the first time in days, he actually sat down and started talking to me properly. I stayed firm. I told him again that his mom staying with us for months, or even years, was just not a viable option. It would fundamentally change our household and our lives in ways I was not willing to accept. I laid it all out clearly this time. If she wanted to visit for longer than a couple of months, she would need to live in her own apartment, learn to drive herself or use public transportation. She would have to adapt to the way things worked here because I was not prepared to change the entire structure of our lives to accommodate her long-term. I reminded him that in Pakistan she was used to being driven around by a hired driver, having household staff, having an entire life that operated differently. Things were not the same here, and pretending otherwise would only create frustration and resentment on all sides. I told him that I was not going to change my mind on this, that he needed to be honest with both himself and his mother, and not keep pushing the "let's keep our options open" narrative. Dragging this uncertainty out would only make things worse. That was when he said it. He asked me how I could claim to love him and yet refuse to do him this favor for his mother. I broke down. I could not stop the sobs that came out of me, and once I started crying I just could not stop. It felt like he had stabbed right through everything we had built together. To use my love for him as a test against my boundaries, against my own comfort and peace, was devastating. Through my tears, I told him that having his mom living with us for such a long period would not just be about me being uncomfortable, it would change everything about how we were raising our first child together. Our early years as a family, our parenting decisions, our routines, our dynamics, everything would be affected. I said that we needed the freedom to figure out parenthood together, not under the influence or supervision of someone else, no matter how well-intentioned. He listened. I think seeing me so broken finally cut through his defenses because after a while, he said he understood. He asked again if I could just not completely shut the door, if we could try telling his mom that the visit would only be for a month or so, and if I felt at any point that it was manageable, then we could talk about a longer stay later. I agreed to that compromise. I said that for now, we would proceed with the regular visitor visa application, the one that only allowed for a maximum stay of 6 months. If somewhere down the line I truly felt different, we could revisit the idea of a super visa, but it would have to be a mutual decision. He seemed somewhat relieved at that, and later that evening he had a long call with his mother. His older sister also joined the call, and it actually lasted about an hour and a half. He took the call outside in the backyard and at one point had to come back in to grab a chair because it was taking so long. I could see from the window that he was mostly listening, not talking much, just sitting there with his head down, occasionally nodding or saying something short. When he came back inside, he looked exhausted. He told me quietly that it would be better if I just did not answer any calls or messages from his mom or his sister for the time being. I checked my phone later and saw that I had already missed 4 calls and received over 20 messages from them. The messages were mostly a stream of Islamic quotes about the rights of parents, sprinkled with passive-aggressive notes about sacrifice and gratitude. I replied briefly, saying that I was busy with my son and would call back later when I could. I asked my husband how the conversation with his family had gone, and he said, just as he had expected. Nothing more. But he was not cold anymore. There was no more silent treatment, no more walls up between us. It was not back to normal exactly, but at least it was the beginning of moving forward. Still, I felt guilty. I genuinely had been looking forward to hosting his mother for a month, to making her feel welcomed and part of our little family here. I had imagined showing her around our new home, taking family photos with her and the baby, letting her feel proud of her son's life here. I had wanted that. But now it felt like there was a crack running through everything. I could not shake the feeling that this whole situation might have caused irreparable damage, not just between me and my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, but also between my husband and his own family. I knew the call with my mother-in-law was coming. I had already promised her I would call back once my husband was home. I was dreading it. Dreading the guilt-tripping, the passive-aggressiveness, the manipulation cloaked in religious and cultural expectations. But at least now, thanks to all the advice and support I received, I knew where my boundaries were. I was not going to let guilt or pressure blur them. I would stay respectful, I would stay calm, but I would stay firm. I also wanted to clarify something that seemed to confuse a few people last time. A lot of the comments assumed that this was a different cultures clash, the classic, you married outside your culture, scenario. That was not the case here at all. My husband and I are both of Pakistani descent. I just happened to be born and raised here in Canada, while he immigrated here when he was a student. But he has been here for like a decade now too. Update 2. After all the missed calls and messages from my mother-in-law, filled with Islamic quotes about the rights of parents and not so subtle guilt trips, I knew that I could not put off talking to her much longer. Since she had been the one actively asking me to call, I figured it made sense that I should be the one to reach out, not my husband. But I was not naive, I knew the conversation could go sideways fast, so when I called, I put the phone on speaker. My husband was lying on the couch, half watching some TV show with the volume muted, and I wanted him to hear every word that was going to be said. As soon as she picked up, my mother-in-law jumped right in. She said my husband had told her that it would be best if she limited her trip to 1 month since it was her first time visiting Canada and because we were busy with the baby. She said it in a tone dripping with disappointment, like she could not believe how low her son had sunk. She reminded me, with a heavy sigh, that ever since he had left for Canada at 18 years old, he had always dreamed of the day his mother could visit and stay with him for a long, fulfilling time. She said she knew this sudden change of heart was not coming from him and that it was obvious I was the reason behind it. I told her it was a joint decision, carefully explaining that it was because of our current life circumstances, but she did not want to hear it. She bulldozed right past my words and launched into a full-on lecture. She said that if the idea of her staying for more than a month was so outrageous to us, then fine, she would restrict herself to just a month. But she wanted me to know how deeply hurt she was. She told me that in Pakistan, in-laws traditionally live with the married couple, just like my sister-in-law was doing with her own in-laws, and that she had assumed, when I was getting married, that I was someone who was in touch with her Islamic and Pakistani roots. After all, my husband had apparently painted a very rosy picture of me to her during those early conversations. She said she was disappointed to realize how whitewashed I was, how distant I really was from the values she held dear. As she said that, I could feel my cheeks burning with anger and hurt. Before I could say anything back, my husband, who had been listening intently, sat up and asked for the phone. I handed it to him wordlessly. I was shaking, my heart pounding with a mixture of rage and disbelief. He took the phone and immediately walked outside into the backyard. At first, I tried to stay inside, but the rage buzzing through me would not let me sit still. I cracked open the door to listen, unable to help myself. From the beginning of the conversation, I could tell he was talking not just to his mother but also to his father. His voice was calm but firm. He told them that it was not like he had fled to Canada secretly in the middle of the night. They had been there at the airport, smiling and proud, waving goodbye. He reminded them that when he introduced me to them, he had never hidden the fact that I was born and raised in Canada. It was not some buried secret suddenly revealed. He told them that we were not living in Pakistan, and they could not expect us to behave as if we were. That our circumstances, our culture, even our day-to-day lives were fundamentally different, and it was not fair to try and impose their expectations onto us now. After that, there was a long stretch where he was mostly just listening. He barely spoke, just murmured acknowledgments here and there. I knew without hearing the exact words that he was getting a full dose of emotional pressure, guilt, and nostalgia. I watched from the window as he pulled over a chair and sat down again, hunched forward, rubbing his forehead. The conversation lasted well over half an hour. When he finally hung up and came back inside, he looked drained. He put the phone down on the kitchen counter and came over to where I was standing, still rigid with anger. He apologized to me, saying he was sorry for what his mother had said, that he did not agree with her assessment of me, and that he appreciated everything I was doing to keep the peace. He asked me to please let her comments go, to try and see the bigger picture, and to stay on board with the 1-month plan. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand why I had to be the bigger person when it was not me who had started throwing around accusations of being whitewashed or disrespectful. But at the same time, I looked at him, at how genuinely exhausted he looked, and I knew that continuing to fight would only deepen the cracks that were already forming. So I took a deep breath and told him fine. I would stick with the 1-month plan, and I would do my best to be a good host during her visit for the sake of my husband, my son, and for my own peace of mind. I am looking forward to her visit much less than I had been before all of this. The warmth and excitement I originally felt have been overshadowed by all the bitterness that has come up. But at least now the boundaries are clear. She will come for 1 month, and after that, the expectation is that she will return home. I am holding on to that boundary like a lifeline because I know myself. I know that having her live with us indefinitely would have been disastrous for my mental health, for my marriage, and for the environment my son grows up in. I am grateful for all the advice and validation I received both here and from my mother. It helped more than I can express. It gave me the strength to hold the line, to advocate for myself without feeling like I was a terrible person or wife for doing so. It reminded me that having healthy boundaries does not mean I love my husband any less. It just means I am protecting the life we are building together, for ourselves and for our child. Update 3. Today, my husband came home with news that I honestly had not been expecting, even though I had secretly been wishing for some miracle to spare us from the looming stress. He told me that his mother's visa application had been rejected. They are applying for the notes regarding the decision, but according to him, it is going to be futile. He explained that it was always a 50-50 shot at best, that the most common reason for rejections is when applicants are considered to have insufficient ties back home, making immigration officers worry they will not return after their visit. He had thought that since his father was staying back in Pakistan, that would have been enough to show strong ties, but apparently not. The second he said the words, it was like a massive weight was lifted off my chest. I tried to school my features into something appropriate, something disappointed but understanding, but inside I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. I had been dreading her visit more than I realized, especially after everything that had been said and implied over the last few weeks. I was ready to host her for a month out of duty and commitment, but not with any joy anymore. It would have been tense, walking on eggshells, trying to survive every little comment about how whitewashed I am or how ungrateful I must be. My husband told me that when he spoke to her earlier, she had been inconsolable. Apparently, after breaking down over the visa rejection, she shifted gears and started asking him to consider moving back to Pakistan permanently. I love Pakistan and I am proud of my heritage, but uprooting my life, my family, and everything we have built here is never going to happen. He told her firmly that it was not an option. Then she gave him his uncle's phone number, the one who lives in the UAE, suggesting he call to get leads for jobs over there, so we could move to the UAE and be just a short 2-hour flight away from her. She added that it would be a more Islamic environment for us to raise our family. He told her it would be difficult and said he agreed to call the uncle just to pacify her for now. When he told me that part, I was livid. I asked him why he was even entertaining the idea when there was no chance we would ever move to the UAE. He said he had no intention of moving, that he loves our life here, his career here is thriving, and he would not uproot our family. He just did not want to crush his mother's hopes in her moment of grief. I personally think he should have been blunt and honest, but at that point, I was too tired to fight about it. He knows where I stand. I decided that I would call my mother-in-law the next day to express my condolences over the visa rejection. It was too late in Pakistan by then anyway. Even though I was relieved, I wanted to do the respectful thing, and I wanted to be able to say that I did everything I could to be supportive, even if it was not appreciated. When I called her, the conversation started politely enough. I told her how sorry I was that she would not be able to visit and how unfair it felt that the visa officers had not been more considerate. For about 2 minutes, everything seemed calm. Then she pivoted sharply. She said that this probably meant she would never be able to visit Canada, and that a few weeks a year of seeing her grandson would never be enough. She pointed out that my parents had gotten to be close to us for 2 years now, so it should be their right too. Then she asked, completely unprompted, if my husband had called his uncle yet about the UAE job prospects because he had not been answering her texts. I calmly told her that I did not know, but also that it would not work anyway. I explained that we live in Canada, we have built our life here, our child was born here, our support system was here, and my husband's career was here. I added that we would absolutely visit as much as possible, that we valued family, and we wanted our son to have a relationship with his grandparents even if distance made it a little more complicated. That was not what she wanted to hear. She immediately launched into a guilt trip, saying that my sister-in-law had been living with her in-laws since she got married, and even though her mother-in-law was allegedly terrible, she stayed out of duty and respect. She said that I should be grateful to have such loving in-laws who simply wanted to be close to us and help us, that not everyone was lucky enough to have that. At that point, I had had enough. I told her very politely that I was extremely grateful for my husband, for my son, and for the life we had built. I thanked her for her understanding and said I needed to go because my son needed me. I ended the call before I said anything I would regret. My hands were shaking slightly as I hung up, but mostly, I just felt done. Before she could call or text my husband and spin the story however she wanted, I texted him immediately with the summary of what had happened. I knew he would not be thrilled because he had wanted to let her hold on to the fantasy of us moving closer, but I honestly did not care anymore. Enough was enough. She needed to hear the truth and accept it. We were not moving. Our life is here. Going forward, I have decided that I will only call her on important occasions, like Eid, or to send pictures of our son if my husband asks me to. That is the limit now. She has shown me again and again that she is unwilling to respect boundaries or accept reality, and I am done bending over backward to appease her. A sincere thank you to the visa officer who made that decision. They have no idea the amount of stress they saved me from. I know it sounds harsh, but living with that constant pressure and judgment would have drained every ounce of joy from our home. I am thankful every day now that we still have our space, our peace, and our chance to raise our son the way we believe is best. On a side note, after reading a few comments about citizenship, I got curious and called the Pakistani consulate. I explained our situation, and the woman there told me that because of the way citizenship works, my son is technically a Pakistani citizen by descent. That made me think about my own situation because, technically, my parents were Pakistani citizens when I was born too. I asked her about it, and she confirmed that I, too, am considered a Pakistani citizen even though I was born and raised here in Canada. Now I will need to look into how this could impact our visit to Pakistan in December for my brother-in-law's wedding. I want to make sure there are no issues with entry, exit, or any surprise obligations when we travel there. That is a whole other thing I need to research properly before the trip. Thank you again to everyone who offered advice, support, and solidarity through this entire mess. I will not be posting anymore because, as far as I am concerned, this issue is finally, blessedly, closed. I have my boundaries. I have my peace. I have my little family. That is all I ever needed.